The dog ignored every table in the diner except the one no one had used in 3 years. At 6:12 on a sleeting Tuesday morning, the bell above the door at Rosie's diner gave one clear ring, and a German shepherd stepped inside, carrying a silver medal between his teeth. Cold air followed him across the black and white tile. Snowmelt darkened the fur along his legs, but he moved without hesitation, past the counter, past the grill, past the smell of bacon, coffee, and warm biscuits. Every face in the room turned toward him. The dog did not beg. He did not shake water from his coat. He walked straight to table 7, where Staff Sergeant Nathan Cole sat alone with one hand around a coffee mug. Nathan looked up slowly. He was 39, broad-shouldered, gray-blue eyes tired beneath short dark hair touched with silver at the temples. His olive field jacket hung over the back of the opposite chair, the same chair no one had occupied since Nathan returned to Bellwether. The German shepherd stopped beside it. His sable coat was dark across the back, his amber eyes calm, his right ear marked by a small notch. An old leather collar circled his neck. He lowered his head and placed the medal on the table. Metal touched Formica with a quiet click. The diner went still. Even the cook behind the pass-through window stopped moving. Rosie Bennett stood near the coffee station with a pot in one hand. "Well," she said softly, "he found somebody." Nathan looked from the dog to the medal. "Not me." The shepherd sat. His gaze never left Nathan's face. Rosie brought a bowl of water and set it near the dog. He glanced at it, then looked back at Nathan. "He is not here for breakfast," she said. Nathan reached toward the medal. The dog did not growl, but one paw moved forward and covered part of it. Nathan stopped. "All right," he murmured. "Your rules." He opened his hand and rested it on the table. The shepherd watched him for several seconds, then lifted his paw. Nathan turned the medal carefully. The front was scratched and dulled from travel. Around the edge was a narrow band of dark leather, stitched by hand. Across the center, for words had been engraved in block letters. "For the man at table 7. Nathan's fingers tightened. Rosie saw the change in his face. "You know what that means?" Nathan did not answer. Table 7 had not always been his. Years earlier, before the final deployment, he and Corporal Benjamin Harper had eaten there every Sunday they were home. Ben always took the chair facing the door. Nathan took the wall. They argued over eggs, stole each other's toast, and promised they would meet there again when the uniforms were packed away for good. Nathan came back first. Ben never did. No one in Bellwether knew why Nathan still chose the same booth, or why he never let Rosie clear the second-place setting until he finished his coffee. The shepherd nudged the medal closer. Nathan examined the leather border and found a seam. Beneath it, something seemed to be hidden, but the covering would not lift. The dog looked toward the clock above the counter. 6:13. Then he looked toward the front door. Nathan followed his gaze. Snow struck the windows in fine white lines. No one stood outside. "Did someone send you?" Nathan asked. The shepherd turned back to him and lowered his head. Nathan noticed a faint mark stamped into the collar beneath the buckle. A single word. Valor. The name struck somewhere deep and old. Ben had once mailed him a photograph of a young German shepherd with oversized paws and the same notched ear. On the back, Ben had written, "This one listens better than you do." Nathan had laughed and put the picture in a drawer. He had never written back. "Valor," Nathan said. The dog became completely still. Rosie slowly set down the coffee pot. Nathan's voice fell to a whisper. "Ben's dog." Valor rose, placed one paw against Nathan's coat pocket, then moved toward the aisle. He took 3 steps, stopped, and looked back. Nathan did not move. Valor returned, touched the metal with his nose, then walked toward the door again. This time Nathan stood. Outside, beneath the diner awning, something pale waited against the wet concrete. An envelope. And across the front, in handwriting Nathan had not seen in years, was his name. Nathan stepped beneath the awning with Valor close beside him. Sleet tapped against the metal roof, and the parking lot shone beneath the diner's red neon sign. The envelope had been protected inside a clear plastic sleeve, weighted at one corner by a smooth river stone. Nathan recognized the handwriting before he touched it. Ben's letters always leaned slightly to the right, as if every word were already moving toward the next one. His own name crossed the front in faded black ink. Nathan Cole. Nothing else. Valor sat beside the envelope and looked toward him. Nathan crouched, picked it up, and felt something stiff inside. Rosie opened the door behind them. Warm air carried the smell of coffee and butter into the cold. "Bring it inside," she said. Nathan did not answer, but he followed her back to table 7. Valor returned to the same place beside the empty chair. Nathan set the envelope near the metal. Water ran from the plastic sleeve onto the tabletop. He removed it carefully, but the paper beneath had already been opened. Inside was a photograph. No letter. No explanation. The picture showed Nathan and Ben outside Rosie's diner almost 12 years earlier, both wearing civilian jackets over military haircuts, both squinting into bright Montana sunlight. Between them sat a young German shepherd with oversized paws and one ear not yet fully upright. Valor. Nathan remembered the day. Ben had driven nearly 4 hours just to introduce the dog, then spent breakfast explaining that Valor understood people better than most people understood themselves. Nathan had teased him about becoming sentimental. Ben had laughed and slipped the photograph into his pocket. Nathan had not known a copy existed. On the back, one sentence had been written. Read what he carried. Nathan looked at the metal again. The leather strip around its edge was not decoration. It folded over itself in 2 narrow layers, covering a second piece of metal beneath. Nathan tried lifting the seam with his thumbnail, but it held fast. A tiny lock sat near the bottom, shaped like a paw print. Valor washed his hands. "You know how this opens," Nathan said. The dog stood, touched Nathan's coat pocket with one paw, then looked toward the wall clock. 6:22. Nathan reached into the pocket and found loose change, a folding knife, and an old brass coin worn smooth at the edges. He had carried it for years without thinking about it. Ben had given it to him after their final deployment together, calling it payment for every bad cup of coffee Nathan had bought him. Nathan placed the coin on the table. Valor touched it with his nose, then turned toward the jukebox near the back wall. He walked there, sat beneath it, and stared at the row of song cards behind the glass. Rosie followed slowly. "He is showing you something." Nathan joined them. Valor lifted one paw and rested it against the lower corner of the machine. The selection displayed there was an old country song Ben had played every time they came home. Nathan pressed the button. After a crackle, guitar filled the diner at low volume. Valor immediately rose and moved toward a framed photograph hanging near the counter. Nathan had passed it hundreds of times. It showed Rosie's diner during a military homecoming breakfast, crowded with uniforms, families, and flags. Nathan and Ben stood near table 7. Valor, still young, sat between them. The dog stopped beneath the frame and looked up. Nathan lifted it from the wall. Something small fell against the wooden backing with a faint metallic tap. Rosie brought him a butter knife, and he eased the backing loose. A tiny brass key dropped into his palm. Its head carried the same paw-shaped mark as the lock on the metal. Nathan returned to the table. Every customer remained quiet now, watching without pretending otherwise. Valor sat beside him. Nathan inserted the key. The lock turned with a soft click. The outer layer of the metal opened like a narrow case. Inside lay a folded strip of waterproof paper, no wider than his thumb. Nathan removed it slowly. 3 lines appeared in Ben's handwriting. "You saved me once. Valor saved me after you left. Now let him find you." Beneath the message was a date. Yesterday. Nathan stared at it until the numbers blurred. The room seemed to recede, leaving only the paper, the dog, and the empty chair across from him. "Yesterday," he whispered. Valor lowered his head onto Nathan's knee. Nathan placed one trembling hand against the dog's neck. For 3 years, he had believed Ben had chosen silence. Now he understood that silence had been carrying something toward him all along. Nathan read the 3 lines again, slower this time, as though changing the pace might change what they meant. It did not. Yesterday remained yesterday. Ben had written the message while Valor was still beside him, while there was still time for one final instruction. Nathan pressed his thumb against the fold in the waterproof paper and felt the old familiar pressure behind his eyes. Rosie turned the jukebox down until only a low guitar remained beneath the sound of sleet against the windows. No one at the counter spoke. Valor kept his head on Nathan's knee, steady and warm, as if this part of the journey required no command. "How far did you come?" Nathan asked. The dog lifted his eyes but did not move. The bell above the diner door rang again. Sheriff Daniel Reed entered, brushing ice from the shoulders of his brown coat. Rosie had called him while Nathan opened the metal. He approached slowly, noticed Valor, then stopped beside table 7. That the shepherd from Harper County? He asked. Nathan looked up. You know him? Reed removed his hat. A dog matching him was reported missing before dawn. Male German shepherd, 7 years old, sable coat, notched right ear. Name is Valor. Nathan handed him the collar tag without removing it. Reed used his telephone to contact the county dispatcher, then listened in silence. His expression changed. Registered owner is Corporal Benjamin Harper, he said. Nathan looked at the date on the note. Reed lowered the telephone. I am sorry. He passed away yesterday afternoon. The words settled gently, which somehow made them heavier. Nathan had imagined hearing that news in 100 ways over the years. A call, a letter, a stranger at the door. He had never imagined a dog carrying it through sleet. How far? Nathan asked again. Reed checked the address. Just under 60 miles from here. Rosie stared at Valor's wet paws. He walked all that way? Reed nodded. Looks like it. Nathan looked toward the door, then at the dog beside him. 60 miles of county roads, frozen ditches, dark fields, and passing trucks. Yet Valor had arrived at 6:12, found table 7, and delivered the medal without stopping for food. That was not wandering. That was work. Reed requested traffic footage from 2 gas stations along the route. While they waited, Nathan studied the photograph and the clues Valor had used. The coin, the song, the hidden key. None of it could have happened by accident. Ben had built a path out of memory, one marker at a time. When the first image arrived, it showed Valor beneath the awning of a closed feed store shortly after midnight. Another camera caught him crossing a side road before dawn, staying near the shoulder and moving north. At a truck stop 20 miles outside Bellwether, he had approached a bench, smelled a glove left there, then continued without entering the building. Reed enlarged the image. A strip of faded gray cloth was tied beneath Valor's collar. Nathan recognized it immediately. That is mine, he said. Years earlier, Nathan had left a handkerchief in Ben's truck after a hunting trip. Ben must have kept it. Reed looked at the medal. He trained the dog to follow your scent. Not just my scent. Nathan glanced around the diner. This place too. Rosie took down the framed photograph. On the back was a small label in Ben's handwriting. Find 7. Nathan felt the room tilt around those 2 words. Ben had not hoped Valor might find him. He had prepared him to do it. The command, the photograph, the coin, the key, the table. Every detail had been chosen in advance. Nathan remembered the last message Ben sent 3 years earlier. Call when you are ready. Nathan had read it, then set the telephone face down. Days became months. Pride became silence. Silence became habit. I should have called him, Nathan said. Rosie sat across from him in the chair that had remained empty for 3 years. Maybe, she said, but he still found a way to reach you. Valor lifted his head and touched the medal with his nose. Nathan unfolded the paper once more. Now let him find you. The words no longer sounded like directions to a place. They sounded like permission. Outside, the sleet began to soften into rain. Reed's telephone rang. He listened, then looked at Nathan. Ben's mother is on her way here, he said. She says there is one more letter. Valor stood before anyone else moved and turned toward the door, waiting. The diner door opened at 7:18, and Eleanor Harper stepped in carrying a square wooden box against her coat. Valor crossed the room before Nathan could stand. He stopped 3 feet from her, ears forward, body still. Eleanor set the box on the nearest table and lowered one hand. You made it, she whispered. Valor moved closer and pressed his head beneath her palm. For several seconds, she held him there with her eyes closed. Rain slid down the windows behind them, softening the gray morning outside. Nathan remained beside table 7, the open medal and Ben's message resting near his coffee. Eleanor looked older than he remembered, but her posture carried the same quiet strength Ben had inherited. She turned toward Nathan. He said Valor would find you. Nathan swallowed. He said that. Every week for the last month. Eleanor brought the wooden box to the table and sat in the chair Rosie had just left. Valor settled between them, one shoulder touching Nathan's leg. Eleanor opened the lid. Inside were photographs, a folded gray handkerchief, a brass training whistle, and a sealed envelope with Nathan's name written across the front. Ben prepared all of this himself, she said. He knew he was running out of time. Nathan looked at the envelope but did not reach for it. Why did he not call me? Eleanor held his gaze. He did. More than once. The answer landed without accusation. That made it harder. Nathan remembered the missed calls, the messages he had listened to only halfway, the promise to respond after work, after the weekend, after he felt ready. Readiness had never come. Eleanor continued gently. He knew you were carrying your own weight. He did not want his illness to become another reason for you to disappear from everyone. Nathan stared at the medal. So he trained Valor to cross 60 miles? Not all at once. He began months ago. She lifted the whistle from the box. He taught him your scent with the handkerchief. He showed him photographs of the diner. He used the command Find 7 until Valor could identify the table from outside the window. The coin led him to your pocket. The song led him to the frame. The key opened the medal. Rosie stood near the counter with both hands wrapped around a coffee mug. Sheriff Reed remained by the door, giving them space. Nathan finally picked up the sealed envelope. The paper was thick, his name written more carefully than on the one beneath the awning. Valor raised his head. He wants you to read it, Eleanor said. Nathan broke the seal. Ben's handwriting filled 2 pages. The first lines were simple. Nathan, if Valor is sitting beside you. Then he completed the one mission I could not finish myself. Nathan paused, breathing through the pressure in his chest. The letter continued. Ben wrote that after leaving the Marines, the days had become difficult in ways he had not expected. Noise disappeared. Purpose thinned. People asked how he was doing, but rarely waited for the real answer. Valor had changed that. The dog needed morning walks, food at regular hours, a door opened, a hand resting on his neck when storms rolled across the valley. Those small responsibilities had kept Ben connected to the world. Then came the line that stopped Nathan. You saved me when we were young enough to believe saving someone happened only once. Valor taught me it happens every morning. Nathan lowered the page. His vision blurred. Valor placed one paw on Nathan's boot. Eleanor reached across the table, but did not touch him. She waited. Nathan forced himself to continue. Ben wrote that he had heard from Rosie about the empty chair at table 7. He knew Nathan still came alone. He knew the walls in Nathan's house were bare and that he had stopped attending reunions. I am not sending you a dog because he needs rescuing, Ben had written. I am sending him because you do. Nathan's breath caught. He covered his mouth with one hand and looked away, but there was nowhere in the diner untouched by memory. The jukebox, the framed photograph, the second coffee cup, the empty chair. Valor rose and rested his head against Nathan's chest. Nathan folded around him, one hand gripping the worn leather collar, the other still holding the letter. No one spoke. Rosie turned off the jukebox completely. Rain tapped the glass. Somewhere behind the counter, the coffee maker clicked and settled. Eleanor's voice came softly across the table. Ben was afraid you would refuse help from a person. Nathan pressed his forehead against Valor's head. He was right. Eleanor's eyes filled, but she smiled. That is why he sent someone who would not ask permission. Valor remained still until Nathan's breathing slowed. Then he lifted his head and looked toward the empty chair. Nathan followed his gaze. For 3 years, that seat had belonged to a promise that never arrived. Now the truth sat beside it, warm, patient, and alive. Nathan pulled the chair away from the table. Valor stepped forward and lay down beneath it. The space was no longer waiting. Nathan remained at table 7 long after the breakfast crowd had gone. The diner grew quiet around him. Plates disappeared. Chairs were straightened. Rain softened against the windows until only a faint gray mist remained over Main Street. Valor rested beneath the chair across from Nathan, his head between his paws, the silver medal lying open on the table. Eleanor had gone to make arrangements in Harper County, leaving the wooden box with Nathan. Sheriff Reed had returned to the station. Rosie moved carefully around the room, giving Nathan the kind of silence that did not feel empty. He read Ben's letter again, then a third time. Each reading changed something small. The first had brought pain. The second brought regret. The third brought instructions. Near the bottom of the second page, Ben had written about Valor's routines. Morning walk before sunrise. Food measured in 2 cups. Medication hidden in soft cheese once each evening. No loud television during storms. A hand on his shoulder when he began searching the room. Nathan looked beneath the table. Valor's amber eyes were open. Watching. You came with a manual, Nathan said. Valor lifted one ear. Rosie approached with a fresh cup of coffee and set it down without asking. Most good things do, she said. Nathan folded the letter carefully. I do not know if I can do this. Rosie glanced at the dog. He crossed 60 miles. Seems like he already decided you can. Nathan looked through the diner window at his truck parked beneath the fading neon sign. His house stood 4 miles outside town, a one-story place with bare walls, a small porch, and a yard he had never bothered to fence. No dog bed, no food bowls, no reason for anyone to wait near the door. For 3 years, Nathan had built his life around not being needed. Valor stood and moved to the front entrance. He looked back once. The same patient signal as before. Nathan put on his field jacket, placed the metal inside its leather case, and slipped Ben's letter into the inner pocket. Rosie handed him a paper bag. Turkey, water, and 2 biscuits. One for each of you. Nathan took it. I did not order lunch. You did not order the dog either. Outside, the rain had stopped. Valor waited while Nathan opened the passenger door, but he did not jump in. Instead, he moved around the truck and stood beside the driver's side. Nathan frowned. What now? Valor touched the lower door with his nose, then sat. Nathan opened it. The dog climbed into the cab, crossed the bench seat, and settled on the passenger side. Ben had taught him where to ride. Of course he had. The road home passed through open pasture and low hills washed clean by rain. Valor watched the landscape through the glass, calm but alert. Nathan kept one hand on the steering wheel and the other near the metal in his pocket. At the house, Valor did not rush inside. He stood on the porch and waited. Nathan unlocked the door. All right, he said. Come in. Valor crossed the threshold slowly. The room smelled of pine cleaner, machine oil, and old coffee. He inspected the kitchen, the hallway, and the closed bedroom door. Then he stopped near a blank wall in the living room. Nathan followed his gaze. No photographs. No shelves. Nothing that said anyone had ever belonged there. Valor returned to the front door and lay down across the entrance. Nathan remembered Ben's words about storms, searching, and keeping a hand near his shoulder. You guard doors, he said. Valor closed his eyes. Nathan spent the afternoon buying supplies from the farm store. A large bed, stainless steel bowls, food, a leash, a brush. The cashier asked when he had gotten a dog. Nathan almost answered that he had not. Instead, he said, this morning. That night, wind moved across the fields and rattled the porch screen. Nathan woke at 1:47 with his heart racing and the old dream already fading. He sat on the edge of the bed, breathing hard. Soft footsteps crossed the hallway. Valor appeared in the doorway. He did not enter until Nathan lowered one hand. Then he came close and stood beside the bed. Nathan placed his palm on the shepherd's shoulder. Warm fur, steady breathing. No questions, no pity. After a while, Nathan's heartbeat slowed. Valor lay down across the threshold, facing the dark hall. Nathan looked at the shape of him beneath the moonlight. Ben had been right. Saving someone did not happen once. Sometimes it happened at 1:47 in the morning, with no witness except a dog who had already traveled far enough to know exactly where he was needed. By the end of the first week, Valor had learned the shape of Nathan's days, and Nathan had begun to notice how empty those days had been before the dog arrived. They walked before sunrise along the gravel road behind the house. Valor kept an even pace, sometimes moving a few yards ahead, sometimes returning to brush against Nathan's leg as if checking that he was still there. At 7, Nathan measured 2 cups of food into the stainless steel bowl. At 7:15, he hid the evening medicine inside soft cheese and set it aside in the refrigerator. By 8, they drove into Bellwether together. Valor waited in the repair shop office while Nathan worked on tractors, generators, and old farm trucks. He never wandered far. Whenever a customer raised a voice over a broken part or delayed shipment, Valor lifted his head but remained calm. Nathan found himself doing the same. Rosie's diner became part of the routine again. Each morning, Nathan entered through the front door instead of taking his coffee to go. Valor walked directly to table 7 and settled beneath the chair across from him. Rosie placed a water bowl beside the booth and stopped setting out the unused coffee cup. Nathan noticed the change on the 3rd day. He said nothing. Neither did she. The absence no longer felt like betrayal. It felt like room being made. On Sunday, Eleanor drove from Harper County with another small box of Ben's belongings. She arrived just before noon, carrying a framed photograph and a red training folder. Valor met her at the door, tail moving once against the floor. Eleanor knelt and held his face between her hands. You look rested, she told him. Nathan almost laughed. Valor looked exactly as serious as ever. Eleanor placed the folder on the table. Inside were handwritten training notes, maps, photographs of Rosie's diner, and a list of commands. Find 7 was underlined twice. Beneath it, Ben had written, "He must choose to stay." Nathan traced the words with one finger. "What does that mean?" Eleanor looked toward Valor. "Ben trained him to locate you, but not to force the bond. Valor was supposed to deliver the message, wait, and decide whether you were ready." Nathan leaned back. "The dog was evaluating me." Rosie poured coffee. "Seems fair." Eleanor smiled, then grew quiet. "There is something else." She removed a folded map from the folder. A route had been marked from Ben's house to Bellwether, avoiding the highway and crossing through 3 small towns. Safe water stops were circled. Sheltered porches were marked with stars. Ben had planned every mile. Nathan followed the route with his eyes. 60 miles had sounded impossible before. Now it looked deliberate, patient, loving in the way Ben had always hidden beneath jokes. He practiced sections of it with Valor, Eleanor said. Never the whole distance. He wanted the dog to know the landmarks. Nathan looked down at Valor. "You were not lost once." Valor rested his chin on Nathan's boot. Eleanor opened the framed photograph. It showed Ben sitting on his back steps with Valor beside him, the silver medal hanging from the collar. On the back, Ben had written one final instruction. "Stay until he begins staying too." Nathan read the sentence several times. He thought of the repair shop, where he now left the office door open because Valor disliked being shut away. He thought of the diner, where he stayed after finishing breakfast instead of leaving before anyone could speak to him. He thought of the previous night, when Rosie had called to ask about a broken porch light and Nathan had driven into town to fix it. 6 months earlier, he would have ignored the call until morning. Valor had not simply entered his house. He had begun opening doors Nathan had kept closed. That afternoon, Eleanor invited Nathan to attend Ben's memorial service the following Saturday. Nathan's first instinct was to refuse. Crowds, old stories, familiar faces asking where he had been. He felt the answer rise automatically. "I cannot." Valor stood before the words reached his mouth. The shepherd touched the red folder with his nose, then looked at Nathan. No pressure, no command, just the same steady patience from the diner. Nathan looked at Eleanor. "What time?" he asked. She told him. On Saturday morning, Nathan wore his olive field jacket and placed Ben's medal back on Valor's collar. They drove south beneath a clear Montana sky. At the church, Nathan stopped beside the truck, unable to move. Valor waited on the gravel, shoulder aligned with Nathan's knee. Nathan placed one hand against the dog's neck. Then they walked inside together. The room was filled with photographs, coffee, quiet voices, and people who remembered Ben before illness made every visit careful. When Nathan entered, conversation softened. Eleanor crossed the room and embraced him without asking. After the memorial, Nathan stood outside the church beneath a wide Montana sky, while people carried flowers and framed photographs to their cars. Valor remained beside him, the silver medal resting against his chest. Nathan had expected the service to leave him emptier. Instead, the stories had given Ben back in pieces. A terrible joke told during a snowstorm. A borrowed truck returned with a full tank. A dog bowl placed beneath a hospital bed because Ben refused to spend a night without Valor nearby. Eleanor joined Nathan near the steps and handed him a small paper bag. Inside were Ben's old coffee mug, a red bandana, and one final note. "He wanted you to have these after the service," she said. Nathan unfolded the note. It contained only one sentence. "Do not keep what saved me locked inside your house." Nathan looked at Valor. The shepherd was watching a man across the parking lot. He appeared to be in his early 50s, wearing a worn denim jacket and standing alone near an old pickup. He had attended the memorial but spoken to no one. When Valor took one step toward him, Nathan felt the leash tighten gently. "You know him?" Nathan asked Eleanor. She followed his gaze. "His name is Thomas Avery. He served with Ben before you did. He has not been doing well since his wife passed." Valor moved another step, then stopped and looked back at Nathan. It was the same invitation he had given at the diner. Not a command. A choice. Nathan crossed the parking lot with him. Thomas watched them approach, but did not leave. Valor sat a few feet away and lowered his head. "Ben's dog?" Thomas asked. Nathan nodded. "Valor." Thomas looked at the medal. Ben said that dog could tell when a room was too quiet. Nathan almost smiled. He seems to notice people who are trying not to be noticed. Thomas looked down at the gravel. For a moment, Nathan considered offering advice. Instead, he said, Rosie's Diner. Table 7. Tomorrow morning at 7. Thomas raised his eyes. Why? Nathan glanced at Valor. Coffee is better when someone complains about it. The next morning, Thomas arrived at 7:12. Nathan had already ordered 2 coffees and left the chair beside Valor open. Thomas sat without speaking. Rosie placed a plate of biscuits between them and walked away. Valor settled beneath the table, close enough for both men to reach him. They talked about engines first, then weather, then Ben. No one asked Thomas to explain everything. No one told Nathan he was healed. They simply stayed until the coffee cooled. Over the following weeks, the table grew crowded. Sheriff Reed introduced a retired deputy named Frank who had stopped attending community events. Eleanor brought a nurse who had cared for Ben during his final months. Rosie began keeping a pot of coffee ready on Sunday mornings. Valor greeted each newcomer with the same calm attention, then chose a place beneath the table. Nathan noticed that people spoke more honestly when their hands were resting on the dog's sable fur. One evening, Rosie found Nathan repairing the loose hinge on the diner door. "You are building something," she said. Nathan tightened the final screw. "Ben started it." "That is not what I asked." Nathan looked through the window. Valor lay near table 7 while Thomas showed Frank a photograph from years earlier. The empty chair had become 2 chairs, then 4. "Maybe I am learning to stay," Nathan said. Rosie nodded toward the metal. "Then perhaps it is time other people learned what it means." Nathan hesitated. The metal felt private, like a final conversation between 2 friends. Yet Ben's note remained in his pocket. "Do not keep what saved me locked inside your house." The next Sunday, Nathan placed the metal in a small glass case on the shelf beside table 7. Beneath it, Rosie added a simple card. "Some orders are given in love." Valor watched from the floor, his collar lighter without it. Nathan sat down and touched the empty place where the metal had rested against the leather. Then the diner bell rang. A young veteran stood uncertainly inside the doorway, rain on his coat and both hands buried in his pockets. Valor rose. Nathan pulled out a chair. "Coffee?" he asked. The man looked at the dog, then at the open seat. After a long pause, he stepped forward. Valor returned to the table and lay between them. Nathan understood then that Ben's final mission had never ended at table 7. It had only begun there. By early spring, Sunday mornings at Rosie's Diner no longer belonged to silence. Table 7 had become the first place people looked when they entered, though no sign announced what happened there. Some came for coffee. Some came because Sheriff Reed had mentioned the group. Others arrived alone, stood near the door for several seconds, and stayed only after Valor raised his head. Nathan never asked anyone to explain why they had come. He simply moved a chair. Rosie kept the conversation ordinary until people were ready for something more. Weather, engines, cattle prices, road conditions. The safe subjects came first. The honest ones followed later. Valor moved between the tables with quiet purpose, resting near whichever person spoke least. One morning, he settled beside a former Army medic named Lucas Grant, who had driven 40 miles without telling his family where he was going. Lucas kept both hands wrapped around a coffee cup and stared at the glass case holding Ben's medal. "What does the card mean?" he asked. Nathan looked toward the words beneath the medal. "Some orders are given in love." "It means someone cared enough to make sure I did not disappear," Nathan said. Lucas studied Valor. "And the dog did all that." "The dog followed the order. The rest took time." Lucas nodded slowly. "Time is the part nobody mentions." Nathan understood. He did not offer a lesson. He told Lucas about the first night Valor slept across his bedroom doorway and how breathing beside another living thing had made the dark feel smaller. Across the table, Thomas added that he had once sat in his truck outside the diner for 20 minutes before finding the courage to enter. Frank admitted he still did that sometimes. The laughter that followed was gentle, not mocking. Lucas stayed until noon. Before leaving, he touched the glass case with 2 fingers, then rested his hand briefly on Valor's shoulder. He returned the next Sunday. The meetings remained informal, but the work around them began to grow. Emily Carter, a local veterinarian, offered health checks for dogs belonging to veterans who were struggling financially. Eleanor connected Nathan with a rescue group in Helena that trained calm adult dogs for companionship. Rosie cleared a storage room behind the diner for donated food, leashes, blankets, and travel crates. Nathan repaired the shelves himself. Valor supervised from the doorway. The first match was Thomas and an older black Labrador named Millie, whose gray muzzle and slow pace suited him. Thomas insisted he was only fostering her. 3 days later, he bought a red collar with her name embroidered across it. Frank chose a quiet mixed-breed dog named Scout, who preferred sitting beneath chairs. Lucas took longer. He visited the rescue center 4 times before a small shepherd mix named June stopped beside him and refused to move. Nathan watched from across the room. "Looks like she decided," he said. Lucas looked down at June. "What if I am not ready?" Nathan remembered asking Rosie the same question. "She may not need ready," he said. "She may only need honest." Lucas knelt. June placed one paw on his shoe. The room grew still in the way important rooms often do. No applause. No speeches. Just one person lowering his guard and one dog choosing not to leave. Months earlier, Nathan would have looked away from such a moment. Now he stayed. That evening, he returned to the diner after closing. Rosie was wiping down the counter while Valor rested beneath the glass case. Nathan opened it and removed the metal. The leather had been cleaned, but the scratches remained. He turned the inner panel and read Ben's message again. "You saved me once. Valor saved me after you left. Now let him find you." The words no longer broke him in the same place. They still hurt, but the pain had changed shape. It had become useful. "You planning to put it back on him?" Rosie asked. Nathan fastened the metal to Valor's collar. "Every Sunday." Rosie smiled. "Why Sunday?" Nathan looked toward table 7, where 6 chairs now stood around the booth. "Because that is when Ben and I were supposed to meet." The following morning, Nathan and Valor walked the gravel road before sunrise. Meadowlarks called from the fence posts. The sky over Montana opened pale and wide. Valor moved a few yards ahead, then stopped and looked back. Nathan did not need to be summoned anymore. He was already following. At the diner. 6 months after Valor entered Rosie's diner, the first snow of the season dusted Bellwether before sunrise. Nathan arrived at 6:10 with Valor walking beside him, the silver metal resting against the old leather collar. The diner windows glowed amber against the blue morning, and the bell above the door rang with the same clear note Nathan remembered from that first day. Rosie looked up from the coffee station. "Table 7 is ready," she said. It was no longer one table. 2 nearby tables had been pushed together, surrounded by mismatched chairs. Thomas sat beside Millie, the older Labrador asleep across his boots. Frank poured coffee, while Scout watched the front door from beneath his chair. Lucas arrived carrying a paper bag of biscuits, with June walking calmly at his side. Eleanor had driven from Harper County and placed Ben's red training folder beside the glass case on the shelf. Inside the case were photographs, letters, and the small brass key that had opened the metal. The case itself remained empty on Sundays. Nathan always fastened the metal to Valor before they left home. He believed some memories belonged behind glass. Others needed to keep moving. At 7, the room filled with quiet conversation, spoons touching mugs, and the low hum of the grill. No speeches were planned. No ceremony had been announced. Yet everyone knew why they had gathered. It was the anniversary of Ben's final message, and the morning Valor had completed his journey. Rosie placed a fresh card beneath the empty case. The words were simple. "Find 7. Nathan read them once, then looked at Valor. The shepherd was watching the entrance. A pickup stopped outside. A man remained behind the wheel for nearly a minute before opening the door. He was young, perhaps 30, wearing a work coat dusted with snow. He stepped inside but did not approach the tables. His eyes moved toward the nearest exit, then toward Valor. Nathan recognized the posture. It was the stance of someone prepared to leave before anyone could ask him to stay. Valor rose. He crossed the diner slowly and stopped several feet from the man. No barking, no pulling, just patient attention. The man lowered one hand. Valor stepped closer and placed his head beneath it. Nathan moved a chair away from table 7. "Coffee?" he asked. The man looked around the room. "I was told there might be a group here." "There is coffee," Nathan said. "The rest can wait." The man sat. Valor settled beside him. Rosie filled a mug and placed it within reach. No one asked for his story. Thomas shifted Millie's bed to make more room. Lucas offered a biscuit. Eleanor smiled without introducing herself. The young man wrapped both hands around the warm cup, and his shoulders lowered by a fraction. Nathan took his usual seat. Across from him was the chair that had once remained empty for Ben. It was occupied now by people, dogs, photographs, and the ordinary noise of lives still being lived. Nathan touched the folded copy of Ben's letter inside his jacket. He no longer carried it because he feared forgetting. He carried it because the words had become part of what he did next. At 8:30, Eleanor asked whether the medal should remain in the case permanently. Nathan looked at Valor. The scratches along the silver caught the diner light. No, he said. It was made to be carried. After breakfast, Nathan and Valor stepped outside. Snow drifted lightly across Main Street. Behind them, the diner remained full. Through the window, the young man was speaking to Lucas while Valor's water bowl sat near his chair. Nathan turned toward the old framed photograph of himself and Ben visible through the glass. For years, he had believed unanswered calls were the final chapter between them. Now Table 7 told a different story. Ben had not returned in the way Nathan once expected. He had returned through a dog who knew the route, through a medal opened by memory, through an empty chair offered to someone new. Valor leaned against Nathan's leg. Nathan rested a hand on his neck. "You found me," he said. Valor looked toward the diner door. The bell rang again as another person entered from the cold. Nathan opened the door wider. Some orders end when the mission is complete. Others become a way of living. And sometimes love does not ask to be remembered. It simply teaches the next person how to stay.